I'm Dr. Jack Turban. I'm a pediatric psychiatrist and author of the book Free to Be, Understanding Kids and Gender Identity. So conversion therapy, or you'll sometimes hear them called conversion efforts, just to emphasize that no real medical or mental health organizations consider them to be therapeutic. They're any attempt to force somebody's gender identity or sexual orientation to change. So most commonly, you'll hear about attempts to force gay or bisexual people to be straight, sometimes attempts to force transgender people to be cisgender. The latest estimate from the Williams Institute at UCLA is that about 700,000 Americans have been exposed to conversion efforts, and about half of those exposures happened when people were adolescents or children. So for many years, people had these different theories that different psychosocial factors or things in your environment could make you gay or trans, and that through psychotherapy, you could change a person's gender identity to make them no longer trans, or change a person's sexual orientation to make them no longer gay. What we saw over and over again is that those attempts just didn't work. And now we have more and more research showing that when people are exposed to those therapies, they have a greater odds of having bad mental health outcomes, including suicide attempts. People who are exposed to conversion efforts, especially if they're exposed when they're young, as children or adolescents, they're more likely to have mental health problems in adulthood, including anxiety, depression, PTSD, and suicidality. People have been looking for a long time to try and find if there's a specific gene or one part of the brain where gender identity lives or where sexual orientation lives. We found a lot of data showing that there is evidence for this innate biological determinant of both your sexual orientation and your gender identity. We've seen that from twin studies, we've seen that from whole exome studies, but it seems that it's this really complicated phenomenon where we can't pinpoint it to just one gene or just one part of the brain, but probably a really complex interplay of different genes in different brain regions that do have this innate basis, but we can't point to just one factor. Yeah, I think this is one of the scariest Supreme Court cases we've seen when it comes to public mental health in a long time. So these are practices that we know are dangerous. We know they're linked to suicide attempts. And if the Supreme Court overrules Colorado's ban on this practice, that could overrule the bans in about half of the United States that have banned this practice. And we could see a huge resurgence of this dangerous practice, which we know is linked to suicide attempts. So we might see more, sadly, suicide attempts among LGBT youth in particular. We've seen a lot of different attacks on LGBT youth mental health in the past few years. One of them is that 988, the mental health crisis line, was designed so that if an LGBT young person calls, they would be directed to competent services to support them in their unique mental health needs when they're in crisis, including if they're feeling suicidal. So if conversion therapy comes back, we're going to have more LGBT youth who are suicidal, and if they don't have access to crisis services that are tailored to them to really help them through those experiences, then we'll have even worse outcomes. So I think the scariest thing that we heard at oral arguments is that the lawyers representing the therapist who wants to overturn this conversion therapy ban just made a lot of assertions that are false. We saw that at oral arguments. We saw it also in their brief, saying things like most kids who are trans are going to change their mind anyway and grow up to be cisgender, suggesting that these conversion efforts lead to good mental health outcomes when we have all of this data showing that they lead to bad mental health outcomes. And this has been a trend we're seeing at the court, particularly when it comes to public health and matters that impact LGBT young people, that we're just seeing a lot of misinformation that I'm hoping the court will see through, and in particular go to the amicus briefs from experts that outlined some of the ways in which that misinformation is not true, and directed them to the research showing why Colorado's law is a good law that protects young people.